Welcome back to another episode of Cody Builds. On tonight's episode, we're back working on the IH392 engine out of my dad's 1975 International 200 pickup truck. Now, the last time we worked on this thing, we went through the whole process of degreasing it, which was an absolute nightmare, but we did all of that to make our job tonight that much easier. So we won't be getting nearly as greasy had we not done all this pre-cleaning. But the goal tonight really is to just start tearing into this engine and seeing what we come across. This engine was running fine in the truck, so we're not anticipating coming across anything too crazy. But while we've got the engine out, we're going to go through the entire thing. Whatever needs to be replaced is going to get replaced. So if that means main bearings, rod bearings, whatever it is, we're going to take care of it while we've got the engine out of the truck. So the goal for tonight, strip this thing down and see exactly what we're up against. So the first thing we're going to do here is pop the valve covers off. We already know these things were leaking like crazy, but I'm very curious to see what we find underneath the valve covers. So let's pop these 5 bolts off. Oh no, 6 bolts off. They shouldn't be too difficult coming off. They were pretty lubricated with all the oil that's been leaking out of them. Okay, and we are using our little bolt bin method again. We're gonna just dump all of our bolts into the bin here, labeling the top, keeping everything nice and organized. Not surprisingly, came right off. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, look at this. Look at, you can see how wet the gasket is all down there. That's exactly where all of this oil has been coming from, which we kind of knew that all along. An old cork gasket's just not doing its job anymore. Not a ton of oil buildup on everything. Way, way, way better than the FE we did earlier. I'm just gonna go through here. I'm gonna rotate on the push rods, see if anything's loose. Everything's nice and tight in here. If we had something like a bent push rod or something, we might expect the rockers to be a little bit loose, but man, everything is rock solid. Even this one, you see it's got a little side-to-side play, but no up and down play. So everything, that's a good start. That's a very good start. So come around, take the other side off here. That one was even looser than the other side. Again, everything looks fairly clean. It means we probably had fairly regular oil changes in this truck right off the bat. That's a good sign. Not a ton of carbon buildup in here, or oil buildup. We do see some down in here, and I was just talking with Jeff about this. I'm learning about these international engines, and my understanding is there's an exhaust crossover that comes from underneath the intake here, and the intention of that was to warm the carburetor up much quicker in the wintertime. So you've got your warm exhaust running right up underneath the carburetor, and you can see how all of this stuff was like really baked on and really hard to get off. That's because this portion of the intake was particularly warm from the exhaust crossover that runs underneath the intake here. And you can see down in here in the center, we've got a pretty good amount of carbon buildup. So we may have a little bit of gasket leak down there, possibly. All right, next thing up, I'm gonna attack the intake here, I think. See if we can't get that off. Another thing I learned is that a number of these bolt holes that are in the intake are through bolts. And so when you see a lot of oil buildup on here, that means the threads probably weren't sealed when the bolts went in. So it's just oil seeping up through the bolt holes actually. It's not actually a leaking gasket or something like that. So that's something to keep an eye on when we go back to reinstall the intake. And the buildup that's behind there is a problem too, it looks like. See if I can't get some of that gunk out of there. some of these bolts, not just on the intake, but even when we were taking apart the transmission and everything else, International really liked their tight clearances. So I'm gonna guess that these are really seized in there because of what we were talking about before. They've been exposed to quite a bit more heat. So yeah, there we go. So when we get this intake all apart, I think I said this before, but we're going to be putting all these cast parts, all the cast iron parts at least, through electrolysis. Really, that's going to help us in a couple of ways. One, it does help reverse any rusting processes that are happening, and it will reduce any of the oxidation that is there and break it up so that we can get it back to nice clean steel. But it's also going to break up some of this paint and some of this really baked on stuff like this, and leave us with a fairly clean cast steel piece when we're done. So even though we are going to fully disassemble this engine and clean everything up, I'm still trying to avoid knocking too much debris down into the block if we can avoid it. That's why I'm vacuuming out these passages. Carbon buildup in here is very stubborn. All right, that's much better. There we go. So a little bit of patience. There it goes. All right, now we should be able to buzz everything out with impact. That should be all of our intake bolts. Now I'm anticipating this intake to weigh a metric ton because it is a big chunk of cast iron. So I'm just going to use my dead blow here, try and knock it loose. I can see it's loose. That's good. All right. Let's see if I ate my Wheaties this morning. You know what? Lighter than the FE intake. So there's that. Maple leaf, maple.
I'm glad you didn't get a tree growing.
Maple helicopter. There's enough nutrients in here. It probably could have germinated. Okay, so I guess next thing we'll go after this valley pan here. So these are the exhaust ports I was talking about. They're exhaust crossover. See how carboned up that is on both sides? And you can see that carbon buildup on the inside on this side. I didn't notice if it had it. A little bit of carbon buildup around the inside of that, but not too bad. The passenger side's much worse. Actually have decent sized intake runners on them. I'm a little surprised by that. A little confused by this. I'll have to look into that. That's a water passage there. So that's almost like a block off plate for that. That's interesting. Show my international ignorance. Okay. Valley pan off. Overall, not awful. Some garbage down in here we just knocked in, I think. There's a little bit of oil buildup on the lifters, or on the push rods. But really nothing terrible. Doesn't look bad in here at all. As you can see, they got the IH stamping in there. That's pretty neat.
How cool is that?
So one of the things we'll do, if you look back here, you can see the casting flash in some of these openings. So when we disassemble this block and we take it down to a bare block, we're going to come in with a die grinder and we're just going to clean up all this casting flash. We'll do that around the back and the front here. There's another opening. We're going to do the same thing. Places like this are important because this is an oil drain passage, it looks like, where you're draining some oil down to your distributor. So any casting flash and stuff we can clean up out of there is going to allow the oil to move more efficiently as it drains through the bottom side here. Same thing with this flash, casting flash back here. We get the first look at the cam here, and it looks like it looks okay. It doesn't look fantastic. That might actually just be oil buildup we're seeing on there. The lobes here don't look too terribly scored or anything, what I can see. So that's all good for a start, I guess. The next thing up we're going to do here is we're going to take apart the rocker arm assemblies. We're going to pull the push rods out, and we're going to try and pull the lifters out without damaging them. So once we get to that point, we need to really organize, keep all the parts in the location from which they came, or identified from the location that they came, so that if the parts are reusable, we can put them right back on the same cylinder, on the same valve, in the same spot. So we're going to do that. I've got an organizer for that, so I'm going to get that out, and then we're going to start to disassemble the valve train here. And once the valve train is out, we can move on to the front cover on the motor, pulling the cam out, and then flipping this thing over and getting the oil pan pulled off. Okay, so we've got basically the whole valve train pulled apart here. We've got 3 lifters stuck in the bores. Now I want to talk briefly about why that happens. If you look at this lifter that we pulled out, you can see where it rides in the bore. It's all polished and nice, clean looking. And you look at the bottom here, you can see that oil buildup, this dark ring, and you can actually see the buildup around the bottom. That little bit of buildup is what keeps you from being able to pull the lifters up through the bores. So we've got the cam pulled out right now, and at first glance the cam looks to be in pretty decent shape. The one thing I'm concerned about, the passenger side all looks pretty good. You can see what you want is just a little bit of a concave end on the end of your lifters. These are going to spin in the bore, so if you have a flat line worn in these, that's no good. You need to replace them. Likewise, if that concave gets to be a little too great, you start to wear it out. That's a problem as well. Most of the lifters on this side look this way on the driver's side. They're not too bad. They're not overly worn. I have a lot more concern about the driver's side. So we pull the driver's side off here, and that conical shape in there is much more pronounced. You can see the light catching it. These just look, there actually you can see a ring worn in to the bottom of this lifter. So a few of these lifters look really worn, or starting to show signs of where I would want to replace those. So likely we're going to end up putting, if not just a couple new lifters, a new cam and lifters in. The cam does look pretty good, so it'll kind of be up to Dad on what he wants to do. If he wants to roll the dice on getting some just new lifters put in, or if we want to do the whole 9 yards and just put a stock cam and lifters back in. All right, so I'm also not an expert on these IH engines, so I'm still learning quite a bit about them as we go along here. One thing to note, solid push rods, they do not oil through the push rods. They're going to oil through the rocker stands here. So you can see we've got this little slotted passage here where oil is going to come up through the block, through this little passage, up through the shaft and this rocker, and then into the rocker shaft itself, up through the stand into the shaft. And there are 3 of those oiling passages on these rocker stands, the middle 3 stands here. So that's going to be the same on the other side. Also of note, it looks like we've got some really silvery colored oil here. a lot of metal in there. We're gonna want to go through all these stands and make sure we get them fully cleaned out, make sure there's no excessive wear happening. Same thing with the block. We just want to go through the block and make sure there's no major wear items that we haven't seen yet. The only thing that I see that it looks a little questionable were some of those, like I said, those lifters on the driver's side. We've got 3 in here that have too much buildup on them. We just can't quite get them out. When we get to the bottom end, we're gonna work those out from the bottom side. So the next thing I wanna do is probably pull the heads off of the block here. Quickly, I wanna show you what I was talking about with the through bolts. So we'll take a light here. So I hold that down there and you can see the light. See how we can see light through these intake bolts? That means that these bolt holes are open straight through into the cylinder head here where all that oiling is going to be happening. So if you don't seal, if you don't put thread sealant on these bolt holes, then you will get some oil seepage up through the intake, which is probably what was happening because there's no sealant on them. Did notice on this intake gasket that this one water jacket is plugged slightly, so I don't know if that's a function, if that's intentional. I'll have to read about that when I get the manual, but we did notice that this one water passage is plugged up, and you can see there's a lot of buildup behind it too, because you just get all that water pressure deadheading up against this gasket. So must be a reason for it. I don't know what it is. Maybe you IH guys can comment down below what that would be for. So next up here, we're gonna go ahead and get the heads pulled off and inspect the heads, the valves, and then the top side of the pistons and the cylinder walls. Look at all this RTV jammed in the back. Like obviously this thing had been leaking oil and they were trying to do whatever they could to stop it. But this is really ineffective. Just a boatload of RTV down in there. So real quick, we'll come over and look at the cylinder heads. Actually, these don't look too bad at all. Nothing obviously that we could see from the top side. On the bottom side here, everything looks fairly good. The only thing I notice is maybe one exhaust valve in each cylinder head. Looks like the seat might be a little more worn than the others. The rest of them don't look bad at all. The valves are still kind of sitting proud of the cylinder head there, which is good, tells us we have a good seating surface. So eventually I'm gonna end up pulling the valve springs, pulling the valves out, cleaning everything up, relapping all of the valves on the cylinder head, cleaning up all those valve seats and doing all that anyways. But again, these are gonna get their turn in the electrolysis tank. Before we do that, we'll end up knocking out all the freeze plugs out of these and really cleaning these out really good once we get the valve springs and the valves out of them. The 2 Phillips heads in the back.
I'm trying to figure that out.
That's a farm fix there, probably. 2 button head screws in the back. I gotta assume that's not factory IH there.
16 bolts and 2 Phillips heads.
Surely those aren't
You don't think that's factory?
Original. Well, maybe they are. I don't know. I don't know. It's an odd thing, but maybe they are. Yeah, so any of the things that were holding oil back, the gaskets weren't doing much of anything. Like this pan, I didn't even have to pry it up. It's not, the gasket wasn't doing anything. Okay, so first we'll take a look in the pan here, I guess. Well, there's some good sludge down in there. Definitely no like major metal chunks, but a good amount of sludge. And you can see streaks of fine metal particulate in there. So that's probably from this, my guess is a lot of the fine metal particulate we're seeing in this truck sat, I don't remember how many years, I think it was 16 or 17 years. And then we fired this thing up and ran it quite a bit last summer. So it's probably a good amount of ring wear as it was blowing through the rust that was on the cylinder walls, which isn't bad. When we flip this thing back around, I'm gonna show you guys, surprisingly, the cylinder walls are in extremely good shape with the exception of maybe one cylinder wall. And I'm gonna assume that one had an intake valve open and got some moisture in there. I'm guessing that's where all the fine metal particulate's coming from. Look up at our pickup up here. A very, very small amount of sludge right in the pickup there in the screen, but nothing crazy. That's actually really good. There's nothing really to write home about there. This is a disaster. All this RTV back here, you can see the gasket was broken, and rather than replace the gasket, they just dropped the pan and put a bunch of RTV over the broken gasket, and obviously that didn't do much anything. So we'll get all that cleaned up as well. I guess the last thing here to do really is get the oil pump and the pickup stand off, and then we can start popping loose the rods. I do want to take the rods out so we can inspect the bearings. Same thing with the crank. I do want to take the crank out so we can inspect the bearings. Odds are, with all that apart, we are likely just going to go ahead and replace the main and the rod bearings anyways, because we're that far down and they're not that expensive. But that's the next thing we're going to do here. We're going to disassemble our oil pump, our pickup here, and then we're going to start taking rod bolts out, knocking the pistons out, and then we'll move to the mains and we'll pull the crank out. So we've got all the rods and the pistons out of the block. No major surprises. Actually, everything looks in very good shape here. I'm going to show you guys probably the worst rod bearing of the bunch. And it's saying something. This motor must have been a really low miles. This is the worst rod bearing of the bunch. And honestly, it's really not bad. You can see a little bit of scoring. Let's see if I can get it on camera there. There you can see that bright line. So a little bit of scoring in there. More or less just the coating worn off a little bit. That's the worst one out of the whole bunch. So the rod bearings are in great shape on this thing. It's kind of just showing this is most likely a low miles motor. Actually, take it back. This one's probably our worst one here. You can see that one there has a good amount of scoring on it. But really, I mean, from what I saw in my FE when I did that motor, way worse condition. All the rod journals look like they're in really good shape. Nothing you can even catch a fingernail on as far as that goes. So we're going to be able to really just clean everything up, probably do a quick hand polish on the crank and get new bearings put in and throw this thing back together. Now the other thing, before Jeff even loosened up the main caps, very easily could rotate this crank by hand. There's just a little bit of in play. It feels like about what you would expect to be in spec. So not much in play at all, just a few thousandths probably. And it rolled over extremely smooth. So I'm not expecting to see anything too crazy in the main bearings either, but we're gonna get the main caps pulled off, pull the crank out, and get one last look at the block here before we kind of go back and review and assess everything that we're going to have to do for this block. All right, we got the whole block torn down. So you guys can see we got the crank out over here. We didn't clean up any of the journals or anything, but nothing really obviously bad. Everything is in pretty darn good shape. Only one bearing in the entire motor was worn through the coating to the copper, and that was the very back main bearing. So, and it wasn't even that bad. I think we can show you guys that bearing here. So you can see on this one, just on the bottom side there, where it just got through the coating there, but everything else still has even the original coating on it. So overall, really good shape for this block. We'll take a look at the cylinders here now, and it's going to be a little bit difficult to see, but because they're just kind of shiny. But there's no major scoring in any of these cylinders. This one's the worst one. So if you look here, there was some rust because there's some rust staining here, but all that's gone. I'm assuming this was just some like surface rust that was on the cylinder walls. And when we've been running this engine, Dad's been running it all summer, kind of smoothed out that surface rust. Now it's just staining. You can't, like, nothing even grabs your fingernail there. So really didn't even get into the structure of the block. The worst cylinder is this one here. There's a pretty good score right down the center on the bottom of this one. So right down, you can see the score mark right down there, and you can hear it catch my finger maybe. But I can just barely catch my nail on that one. Everything else, every other block or every other cylinder here is pretty darn clean. So no cross hatching. So we're definitely going to want to hone. We're just probably going to garage hone these. Actually, you can see cross hatching all the way at the bottom, below where the piston rides. So we're not that far off from having had cross hatching in here. So, I mean, everything. The cylinders look good. The lifter bores look good. All the bearings, mains, and rods look good. Honestly, we probably could have got by without tearing this engine down. But the point is, we're here. Now's the time to do it. Now's the time to check and make sure you don't have an issue, because sure enough, had we not done this, there might have been something catastrophic going on. So I think the situation here is we've probably just got some worn out piston rings, if anything. Maybe they've lost a little bit of their tension, because even with the rotating assembly in there without the heads on, you could turn everything over by your hand very, very easy. So I do think it probably needed a set of rings. It's just going to make it run that much stronger with a good set of rings. But other than that, we're going to just clean this block up. We're going to do the honing right here in the garage like we did with the Ford engine. We're probably not even going to mess with the cam bearings, because if all the other bearings look good, we will inspect them. But if all the other bearings look good, the cam bearings almost certainly are going to look good. We'll pull all the plugs, everything out of this block. We're going to clean out all the passages, because the main thing is we've got a good amount of sludge in the bottom of the pan. And if any of that's worked into any of the oil passages in this block, we want to be sure and clean all of that out before we reassemble this engine, because the last thing we want to do on the first fire up is push any sludge through the engine, through the bearings, score up the bearings, and all that hard work is for naught. So the next step here really is going to be just clean, 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 clean. We'll eventually prep this block. We will eventually tear the cylinder heads down and rebuild those. Whatever we need to do in those, I don't even know we're going to have to do much with those, because even the valve seats look really good on those. So overall, this is like a really good condition, low mileage engine, and it's going to make a really good power plant for Dad's truck. All right, guys, so that's going to do it for this one. We're all done here for the night. Got the block all stripped down. The next step is really just going to be a lot of cleaning, a lot of prep work before we start to put this engine back together. Now, don't forget, my website is live now. So if you want to support the channel in ways other than just watching and subscribing, you can head over to codybuilds.com, grab yourself a t-shirt, stickers, can koozie, no pressure. Go check that out over at codybuilds.com. But that's going to be it for this evening, guys. As always, if you don't work on your projects, they will not work on themselves. Get out in the garage, get building. I'll see you on the next episode of Cody Builds.